Susan, this is something we have seen before, campaigns responding to a natural disaster during an election. What is different about how this one is playing out this time?
Look, there's nothing that Donald Trump can't politicize. It is, one of the main chapters in his playbook. Of course, he's going to go in that direction, especially because both Georgia and North Carolina are such hotly competitive states this year. They are crucial, in fact, for Donald Trump, for his electoral college map. The road to re-election for him definitely runs through Georgia and North Carolina. And, he's looking to divide. I mean, one thing that was consistent in Trump's presidency that we're seeing in his response right now is truly a view that there is blue America and red America. And he conceived himself to be a president for red America. Now he's a candidate for red America. And I thought it was very revealing that his accusation of the North Carolina governor would be, well, you're only serving your own areas, because I think that's how he categorizes the world. And I thought it was very revealing that he's seeking to plant this doubt. I just think of Donald Trump, disaster relief president, Puerto Rico, throwing the paper towels. It's not exactly his strong suit, organizing a government response.
Yes, these seeds he's planting are lies. And my question is, will they take root and grow, right? Today's split screen showed VP Harris meeting with FEMA, helping coordinate a federal response. And then on the other screen, you've got Donald Trump in Georgia, which was devastated by the storm, and he's lying to people about the response, right? We think everybody's going to see this split screen and see what a liar he is, and it's terrible for his campaign. But is it, Sam? Those people in Georgia that he's speaking to, do they know where Kamala Harris was or what she's doing today? Or will he be successful in saying, I'm here for you, look what I'm doing, when all of it's a lie? Do the people he's telling the lie to in Georgia, do they even know it?
Well, I don't know. It's impossible to say. I do think, to Susan's point, he's very quick to politicize. And I think there is something to the idea that he knows there's history here, that presidents can get blamed for a poor response to natural disaster. He himself was blamed for what happened in Puerto Rico. And so I think he's trying to turn the page on that and make Biden and Kamala Harris suffer electorally for it. At the same time, and I don't know if this is true, it's just sort of a hunch, but I think the sort of obviousness of the lies, the ability to just so quickly point out how grotesque they are, really defeats the purpose of what he's trying to do. If he gets up there and he says, for instance, that Brian Kemp has trouble reaching the president, and then in 2 seconds you can locate video of Brian Kemp saying, hey, I got hold of the president yesterday, the story doesn't become, wow, Biden's doing such a poor job. It becomes, why is Donald Trump making up stories in the midst of a national tragedy? And why is he drawing attention away from the people who are legitimately suffering and putting it on the campaign? So, yes, in the short term, there might be some gain here, but it doesn't come without risk.
Jeff, North Carolina is a crucial swing state. Election officials there are already saying that this storm could affect voting. When you think about mail disruptions, destroyed polling places, and people who have lost all their belongings, no IDs. I mean, voting might be the last thing on their mind in a few weeks. How big a problem could this be in North Carolina?
Well, I think we're just probably beginning to learn how big of a problem it could be, but it absolutely is a problem, Steph, and you're right to mention that. I mean, we're just a few weeks now away from the election. It's just the beginning of October, and the election is November 5th. And the disaster and the tragedy that the people in these states have faced, and the infrastructure loss, means that not only are they dealing with returning and repairing their lives, but basic things like going to the voting booth and or receiving ballots in the mail and putting them in the mail are up for grabs. So that's absolutely something I think that is on the radar now and could end up really having an impact in the election. I would just add as well to some of the clips that you were playing earlier. I was in the pool today at the White House, so I was in the Oval Office when President Biden was asked about former President Trump's comments, and the anger that he displayed is pretty real. I think it is frustrating to him to have to, at the same time that he's trying to navigate this major disaster for these states, also have to deal with these misstatements from his former opponent and his predecessor.
And of course, what would the federal response be if Donald Trump got his wish just a few weeks ago when he wanted the federal government to shut down? Imagine if our government was shut down and a disaster like this hit. All right, new topic. I want to talk not about Donald Trump in Georgia today, about Donald Trump over the weekend and some of his comments at a rally. Here's a look, starting with what he had to say about shoplifters and how he thinks they could be stopped.
You know, these are smart people. They're not so stupid, but they have to be taught. Now, if you had one really violent day, like a guy like Mike Kelly, put him in charge, Congressman Kelly, put him in charge for one day. Mike, would you say, he's right here, he's a great congressman. Would you say, Mike, that if you were in charge, you would say, oh, please, don't touch them, don't touch them, let them rob your store. All these stores go out of business, right? They don't pay rent, the city doesn't have money. It's a chain of events that's so bad. One rough hour, and I mean real rough, the word will get out and it will end immediately. End immediately. You know, it'll end immediately. Kamala is mentally impaired. Joe Biden became mentally impaired. Kamala was born that way. Okay? She was born that way. I could have been sunbathing on the beach. You have never seen a body so beautiful. Much better than Sleepy Joe.
That's the Republican nominee for president after talking about his beautiful body. That's his choice. He called the vice president mentally impaired. So why doesn't she get up on stage today, and say, if I'm mentally impaired, debate me, big boy. Let's do that. Susan, should that be her response?
Well, it's not an original observation at this point for me to say that if she's mentally impaired, then it doesn't really make Donald Trump look so good that he lost to her, according to many Republican commentators, as well as independent observers of that debate in September. You know, I will be interested, Steph, to see whether Trump can resist demanding another shot at the debate stage. You know, his ego would seem to demand it. He's really operated under the principle in politics that if there's a spotlight, you should run to it. You know, not just in politics, in his entire life. Tomorrow night will be the debate between Vice President aspirants Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. And I just don't know that Trump is capable of staying out of the spotlight if one is offered like that. So we'll see there. His rhetoric, as you pointed out, is really escalatory. I think the next 36 days, it's going to go up and up and up and up. And as always, it's the palpable threat of violence that Trump tends to wield the closer to the election. I mean, that's the through line for me, is the very, the idea that violence will cleanse our society. When Donald Trump himself is calling his remarks dark, that we're in a pretty scary place.
All right, well, then let's stay dark, because Trump and his fellow Republicans have these new talking points about 13,000 migrant murderers who they say are currently at large, who were let into the country by the Biden-Harris administration. Well, for fact's sake, let's tell you the truth. The people on this list are not all at large. They just aren't in ICE custody. Many of them are in federal or state prisons, and most of them did not enter the country during the Biden administration. They entered the country in the past 40 years, including the Trump administration. So here's my question, Sam. Immigration is a problem. Illegal immigration is a problem. It is a vulnerability for Democrats. Many Americans on both sides of the aisle are unhappy. So why doesn't Donald Trump just tell the truth and make a good case?
Well, I don't think he can really help himself, honestly. I'm with Susan on this one. I think he ties the idea of violence towards electoral benefit. I mean, I just think it's kind of shocking, honestly, to step back and think that he went on stage and literally called for a national day of violence. I mean, that's what he did. He called for a national day of violence. And that was just sort of the tip of the iceberg of the weekend remarks. I mean, the stuff about immigration was, to borrow a word, far darker. He talked about migrants coming into your kitchen and slitting your throat. I mean, the imagery is just beyond the pale. And I was thinking back to his runs for 2016 and 2020. Obviously, nativism, anti-immigration rhetoric has been a through line throughout his rise for politics. But I think it's fair to say that this run is the most nativist, the most xenophobic run for the presidency in modern American history. And I think journalistically, we owe it to the public to call it out for what it is. And precisely that, it's a historically xenophobic campaign. And I don't think he has the ability or the temperament to temper it. I think he thinks this is a winning issue.
Okay, but even, I can't believe I'm saying this, but even if you wanted to put xenophobia or humanity aside, and I realize that's absurd, Jeff, immigration doesn't have to be a weak point for Democrats. Our economy grows through legal immigration. And Donald Trump's solve is build a wall and mass deportation. What we need, the answer we need, is an efficient processing system. Why don't Democrats just lead with that?
Well, you're asking in a broader sense, Steph, why don't people just vote on policies? And in this case, why doesn't the Democratic Party come up with a different policy like the one you're suggesting? I can't answer the latter question. The first question is a longer answer too. I mean, policy certainly has played a role in this campaign, but the policy issue of immigration has for sure been a vulnerability for the Democrats, for Vice President Harris, for President Biden when he was the candidate. She tried to address that a little bit by visiting the border this week, by suggesting a stronger border policy. They're certainly benefiting from the executive order that President Biden put out, which is impacting the number of people coming across the border. But back to your initial question, do voters look at these policies and do they judge the candidates based on their policies, or do they remember buzzwords? Do they remember insults? Do they remember mistruths? And I think the broad answer to that question is it's a little bit of all of the above. And that's one reason why the former president uses the tactics that he does, because they do help him. And it's one reason that Vice President Harris is using a different kind of tactic or strategy, and it is to come out with some of these policies and to talk about them and see if they resonate. But at the end of the day, they have to resonate with somebody as they go to the ballot box.